What is happening and what is up? Hold out your glass, because we're about to fill it up.
All things continually lead back to serpents, dragons, fairies, Nephilim, and fallen angels.
In the distance looms a mystical mountain.
As Mike Heiser used to say, if it's in the Bible and it's weird, it's probably important.
At its peak, a great fire burns, concealing the Prometheus lens.
This development of this knowledge that's being talked about within the mystery schools.
An ancient artifact said to reveal the hidden truth within a deliberately darkened world.
There's a hidden history that's been deliberately obfuscated from the peoples of the world.
Join us as we travel and explore the vast unknown. It's a hero's journey with dragons to slay, damsels to save, and innumerable treasures to hoard. Torches high.
The Smithsonian, they caught wind of a giant skeleton. They would send their agents out to get it.
But it takes courage to move forward, to move out of the shadows, out of the unreality that we think of as reality.
We are all on the hero's journey.
Mankind has been in contact with and influenced by extraterrestrials.
Leave the Sitchin mound of bull feathers out of it.
You know, look at it from a different perspective.
What is happening and what is up? Hold out your glass, because we are about to fill it up. Welcome to the Prometheus Lens Podcast, the place where the conversations are always in light. I'm your host, Justin, and here we like to use the allegory of the Prometheus Lens to take a second look at everything. If you're new to the channel, welcome to the hero's journey. Hit that like button, hit the subscribe button. We'll have our socials coming down below. Be sure to check us out on our various platforms. That would be much appreciated. Well, today, I got a riddle for you. There's 3 doctors in the room. Can you pick out the phony? It's pretty easy, right? Today, I'm joined with 2 brothers I've had on the show a couple times, but never together. So I'm really excited to have these 2 gentlemen together, and especially with our subject matter. We're going to be diving into Göbekli Tepe and the history of this fascinating site and how it turned the world of archaeology on its head at its discovery. And it's recently been in the news, and kind of disturbing when we found out who actually owns/controls this site. So we got a lot of things to talk about today, but I'd like to welcome to the show Dr. Aaron Judkins. Welcome.
Thanks, Justin, for having me. It's glad to be back on.
Yeah. And of course, we have Dr. Judd Burton. Judd, thank you.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me, Justin.
Well, I know I was scrolling through Facebook, and I seen Aaron had shared this news article. And when I clicked on it, it was, I can't even remember the title of it now. I don't know if you do, Aaron, but it seemed really like fanatic or fantastical. And you remember I said, is this clickbait or is this real? And you're like, no, this is real.
Is that the one on the World Economic Forum taking some kind of ownership into Göbekli Tepe?
Yeah.
Yeah. Actually, I think Judd was the first one to post that, because that's when I saw it, when Judd posted that. And I was taken back by it, actually, and I was intrigued. I read that article and became quite concerned afterwards. I realized that was true, and it's disheartening, but it's concerning at the same time.
Yeah, certainly. A little bit of background on the move to do all this, and basically what the article conveyed is that a consortium had emerged between UNESCO, a private corporation in Turkey, and with the World Economic Forum sort of playing silent or semi-silent partner to all of this, however you want to, all under the auspices of responsible curation of the site. Now, a kind of covering for visitors to use when they came to the site to look at one of the enclosures had already been set up. But basically, this article communicated that there would be a visitor center and a number of other buildings put up over potential sites on the complex itself. Now, there's a lot of Göbekli Tepe that's not excavated yet. It's a 300 meter or more square site with more enclosures that have been discovered by various types of archaeological reconnaissance. So there's still a lot of work to do. But one of the things that this article said was that they would reserve or save the rest of this site for future excavation by another generation of archaeologists, which is a little bizarre. Because with a site of such immense importance, you would hope that the responsible archaeological investigation and curatorship of the site would be continued to excavate, because there are lifetimes of work left to do at the site itself, and it's not uncommon, and Aaron can speak to this too. It's not uncommon for at an archaeological site for at the end of a dig season to cover over part of your work and then backfill it so that you can preserve it and then come back, the next season, a month down the road or whatever, and pull that back up and pull the tarp back up and just continue to excavate down at the level that you had. But that's not what's happening here at Göbekli Tepe. There seems to be something else at work here. It's not the typical kind of cultural resource management that you see on most archaeological sites being done. They certainly wouldn't be paving over potential sites and already planning structures to be modern structures, interpretive centers, that sort of thing, to be built over them. So it's very bizarre, and I'm sure that Aaron is probably in agreement with that. It's a very bizarre process, and the players that are coming to the surface here, it seems like a very strange kind of partnership.
And Aaron, I know you've been over there and investigated this site, and he's wrote a book. And if you guys haven't checked it out, it's The Guardians of Göbekli. Great book. And it's honestly just full of imagery and designs, and shows you, it's really intricate book. It's almost like you get to have boots on the ground. I highly suggest you check it out. But Aaron, that article too talked about the guy that discovered it or had a major hand in it, that his wife went to the site and she was just appalled when she seen all the pavement and concrete, and they had to drill down to lay the foundations for these coverings and things like that. From an archaeological standpoint, they're not only not digging anymore, they are destroying what lies underneath. You care to speak on that, just your experiences there?
Yeah. Well, just to back up, briefly, I've never been to Göbekli Tepe. I've been to Turkey. That was in 2013 when I was there with a scientific expedition team on Mount Ararat in search of Noah's Ark. I wanted to go to Göbekli Tepe afterwards, but in 2013, the Kurd refugees and the Syrian refugees were being really persecuted by Saddam Well, it was by the, I think it was by the Syrian government. I said Saddam, that's not right. It's by the Syrian government. They were fleeing over from the Syrian border. So Göbekli Tepe is very close to the border. And so they closed the site and they sent everybody home as a safety concern. There was thousands and thousands of refugees pouring over the border at the time. So I did not get to go. Hopefully next year in 2025, Dr. Burton and I, along with Derek and Sharon Gilbert, will be taking a whole group of us over to Turkey, in which part of that is going to include Göbekli Tepe and Karahan Tepe and several of these other sites. So, and Justin, I see.
Did you raise your hand, Justin?
Can I go in somebody's luggage, please?
You could potentially go.
I'd love to go.
Yes, we're opening it up, and so it's going to be a busload of whoever wants to come. Get a hold of Dr. Burton or myself or Derek and Sharon Gilbert for more information on the trip. But you can reach out to us directly. We're planning on that probably, I think, in the spring of 2025.
Yeah, I think April is kind of what we're shooting for. Yeah.
April, yeah. So it's going to be a wonderful trip. But Judd and I have been working on a collaborative work now for some time that will be coming out hopefully next year. That will be more
sooner.
Work on maybe sooner on Göbekli Tepe. So going back to your point though, Justin, about Professor Smith's wife. Now he passed away a number of years ago unexpectedly, but his widow, I understand, had gone to the site to look at it, and she was appalled really at what she had noticed. Judd had referenced it. They're pouring concrete over some areas. I don't know if it's walkways or areas of where people can walk, or if it's for new buildings or whatever. But it's not what she had hoped for, and I think she was quite disappointed because Professor Klaus Schmidt would have never probably wanted that either. So there is some problems, I think, with the continuing efforts of them halting excavations, if you will. That's a little bit unusual, as Judd had said earlier, because normally at the current rate of excavations prior to all this, with only Göbekli Tepe being around 5% excavated, well, that leaves 95% still under the ground. This is a 22-acre site, roughly, and at the current rate of excavations, you excavate 2 times in a season. That's going to take a long time. That's my lifetime, and it's going to take another generation's lifetime just to excavate what they have. So to say, hey, we're going to halt here and preserve it for future excavations doesn't really sound right, because there's already a lot there to excavate. And the question comes up is why? Because there is so much information coming out of the ground from this time period that's revealing new information for us. For instance, we are now learning that the Neolithic period of these people weren't just simple hunter-gatherers. These people had a complex society. They had a complex form of organization, a division of labor. They were complex. They obviously built megalithic structures like Göbekli Tepe. How do they do these things? So there's a lot of information that is still being learned. But if we stop all that, then the question is why? Is it something that they've already uncovered and they don't want to reveal any further? So these are questions that kind of come up because we know that the information coming out of the site itself, once it's excavated, is very slow to get rolled out to the public. Sometimes it's a year or more before we actually know what they've already uncovered. So the question is why are they doing this? Why are they stopping? I think it's a good kind of a cover story. I don't think it matches up with historically what's known at archaeological sites.
Well, I've had a conversation with some guys from another podcast called Appalachia Intelligence, and they're just a couple, good old boys like me. But we were talking, and they threw up some, ideas, on why they would do this. And, one of them said, well, I think it's because maybe they found some, fallen angel tech or something like that there. And then I was like, well, in the very least, it's already starting to rewrite history, and people's, reputation are on the line. I spoke with David Roll last night, and he was saying it's all about egos and reputation. People don't want to backpedal on their life's work and have to start again.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's very true. I would speak to that second point. In my world civilization classes, when I was a professor, I always spent the first quarter of the term on prehistory, because it's such an understudied, undertaught, under-disseminated part of the progress of human culture. And as Dr. Judkins was pointing out, Göbekli Tepe, along with other sites like Novaluchari and the now Karahan Tepe, but other sites like Tel Caramel and Natufi and Jericho in Israel, have scientifically, archaeologically rewritten the timeline for the emergence of what has historically been called civilization. Aaron was pointing out that at Göbekli Tepe, even if the peoples that came to the site were still on the verge of a hunter-gatherer lifestyle, they develop a society here that has all the classic hallmarks of a civilization. Your social hierarchy, your division of labor, religion is what drew the people there in the first place. So they had all of the organizational aspects of a civilization that we would apply to the Mesopotamians and the Egyptians that emerged millennia later after Göbekli Tepe. And one of the other things I did when I was a professor of history was to assess what textbooks were saying about prehistory and the role of late prehistory in particular on the development and emergence of civilizations. And I was appalled even in like 2005, 2010, 2015, the lack of current archaeological data on sites like Göbekli Tepe that were literally rewriting history. I was appalled at the lack of mention and reference of sites like this in world history textbooks, college level world history textbooks. A couple here and there would have a paragraph or two about Göbekli Tepe, and that was about it. And that's been the norm for world civilization, world history textbooks, really for decades, is to treat prehistory as some kind of speed bump. And then we get on to the rest of civilization: the Sumerians, the Harappans, the Shang Chinese, the Egyptians, et cetera, et cetera. But we're finding out now that those are late in the game in terms of the emergence of quote unquote civilized or city-state dwelling civilization, city-state dwelling peoples. And you're right. Academics are notorious about not about letting go of their legacy, and I understand that to a degree. But if the purpose of writing scientific archaeology, writing scientific history, using that process is to to write an accurate account, and that's not really what's being done, nor is it being taught properly, in my estimation. Because the whole point of archaeology and history is that if you find new evidence and it corroborates the narrative, that's great. But if you find evidence that contradicts it, then the narrative needs to be amended according to that. And that's not what's happening, at least in part, with sites like Göbekli Tepe and Karahan Tepe. So that should at least, that on the surface, that second point there should raise eyebrows for people, I think. But as to the first point, what have they found thus far that might prompt certain interested parties to obfuscate evidence? Well, that is an interesting question. And one that I think that both Dr. Judkins and I could speak to.
Well, I was going to ask Aaron, because as I was brisking through this book, I'd seen something that I had highlighted and I had forgotten about, that there was a lens found at this site. Is that right, or did I misread this? Because I even folded it. I was like, man, what is that about?
That may be in the
Nimrod. The Nimrod.
Yeah,
lens.
that's not associated with Göbekli Tepe.
Oh, okay.
That's called I think that's called the Nimrod lens, is what you're referring to.
Hey guys, what's going on? Hey, I just got a call to action for you. If you're enjoying this episode at all, you're getting anything from it, please take the time to click that like button, click that share button, and share us with your friends and your family on social media. Those are great things that help us to grow the show and increase our listenership. And also, while you're here and I have your attention, flip over from the chat, go to the comment section. Just drop me a quick comment. Let me know where you're from, what you think of the episode. All these things help the algorithm and help the show. And if you're not on YouTube and you're listening on your favorite platform, please, if you've not done so already, give us a 5-star review. All of these things are great ways that you can contribute to the show that you love and listen to every single week. Thank you guys for all the love and support. Back to the episode.
That's just an example of technology that the ancients had and was able to incorporate into use. So I give examples of, that the Sumerians, the Egyptians. These are just examples of the ancients having technology, advanced technology, that they could do things that, we never had considered in the past. And as Judd was mentioning, anytime the archaeological record bears out evidence that has contradicted our theories, then our theories need to change and align with the evidence that's coming out of the ground. This evidence is extremely important because it's some of the earliest archaeological evidence that we know. And some of these sites are older than Göbekli Tepe. Judd had mentioned earlier, he referenced a site called Tel Caramel. That's a site in northern Syria that's making some interesting interesting waves, I guess, in the archaeological world. It's a pre-pottery Neolithic, just like Göbekli Tepe, but it's older. But we do have some interesting finds coming out of Tel Caramel, such as the people who lived there had buried their dead. They have found human burials. They found animal burials. This was really one of the confusion points of Göbekli Tepe. Initially, archaeological evidence was thought to just show that they came and then they left. And that's what they had told us for a long time. But now it seems that really maybe is not the case. They actually lived there. and they found rectangular structures adjacent to the circular enclosures, and they found 3 human burials at Göbekli Tepe. And just like the people of the Neolithic, they buried people, their loved ones, under the floors of their homes. This is exactly what we see at Tel Caramel. Not only that, they found copper at Tel Caramel. And we know that there's a mineral that's associated with copper. It's called azurite. And it's called malachite. Malachite is associated with copper. And so I think these were probably mining some of the malachite there to get the copper, but they actually found a rather large ignite size of copper that looked like it had been refined somewhat through fire, which is interesting because this is supposedly a Stone Age culture before the Bronze Age. So this is interesting information that's coming out. One of my predictions about Göbekli Tepe is that perhaps copper will be found at that site as well. But I think what's more interesting, which by the way shows that they are working with metals, not just stone tools, by the way. That's the significance of that. But I think what's more important is that there was female motifs that were discovered at Tel Caramel. And this is exactly what we see in Mother Earth worship. These little female motifs, and they're just little figurines. Most of the time they're associated with Venus. And on one of the little stones, it looked like to me was the image of Venus. So usually they signify Venus as a star, and they just do, a number of crosses and then one straight through. And normally that's indicative of Venus. So, and which is found at Tel Caramel. So this is interesting because if it's older than Göbekli Tepe, then I think there's something important happening regionally around the region, not just Göbekli Tepe, but at Tel Caramel, Chattahoochee, Jericho, exactly. But there's a cultural tie that ties all these sites together, and so that's the work that Judd and I has been working on. But this is exactly the information that needs to come forth, and when it comes out that the excavations at Göbekli Tepe may be slowing down or stopping, then it raises an important question: is why? There's no need to stop to reserve it for further generations. There's so much there already. They need to advance the excavations. They need to, in my opinion, they need to bring in more people and just really, start really trying to get it excavated, the entire site. It's slow and it's painstaking to do it, but just to stop and say we're just gonna save this, that doesn't quite sound right to me. So I'm leery about that, but the information really needs to come out. And again, you have to ask, have they found something that they don't want the public to know? It's interesting.
And speculation, just from your guys' point of view, you got the 10,000 plus hours. What could that be theoretically? Just speculation. If there was something that they found that was just so paradigm shifting, they had to hit the brakes. What would something like that look like, in your opinion?
Well, they've certainly already found the material that shatters the paradigm. I used to tell my students that Göbekli Tepe is the paradigm that shatters the paradigm, and I'm sure that Aaron would agree that if, and God willing, the excavations would expand and continue, we're going to find more of that sort of thing at Göbekli Tepe. I would say, just from a scholarly conjecture, that may be something that feeds into this obfuscation. And I would add to that one thing we need to remember, that if you look at the history of archaeology as a science, it's always been political. It always gets politicized. I mean, there's not a period in the history of archaeology where that's not the case. So politics, for good, often for ill, is always going to be part of the process. Unfortunately, the politics here seem to be international, given the consortium that seems to be behind the obfuscation, and given the work that Aaron and I have done thus far, I suspect that we can't look for only mundane, and by mundane I don't mean boring, I mean just earthly, materialistic reasons for that obfuscation. I think the reasons for it extend into the supernatural, simply because of the nature of the site itself. And if Justin, this is your show. If you want us to start delving into that, we certainly can.
Oh, definitely. Yeah, that's why I got you guys on. I mean, I just want to be a fly on the wall and let you two bounce off each other and see where it goes.
Okay, Aaron, are you ready to tag team?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, I'll take a swing, and then I'll let you. I've spoken about this before. I know that Aaron has too on podcasts. So it's not like we're letting the cat completely out of the bag. But Göbekli Tepe is at an interesting location, in that it's near the headwaters of the Euphrates, and arguably near the location of where the Garden of Eden was. One of the theories, one of the hypotheses that we've been kicking around the last couple of years, is that Göbekli Tepe was a watcher outpost. Again, that does, even if we're looking at a watcher outpost here, that does not denigrate or put aside any of the archaeological work that's been done thus far. The human component can't be taken out of Göbekli Tepe, and the work that Klaus Schmidt and his colleagues have done has been monumental. In fact, it's to those archaeologists who don't have a religious stake in the game that we owe the mounds of data that we have about the site to begin with. But one of the things that I began to consider about the site of Göbekli Tepe is that it's such a 90-degree angle cultural change in the trajectory of human societies and human civilization. Are there analogs to these kinds of changes in human history? And there are really precious few. One of the scholars that I began to consider, in terms of their contribution to the ideology that I'm tracking here, is Jared Diamond. Jared Diamond wrote a book called Guns, Germs, and Steel. Now, he's not a religious person, pretty much agnostic, atheistic when it comes to this sort of thing. But what I've always found interesting about Diamond's work is his analysis of proximate and distal causes in history. And his work, Guns, Germs, and Steel, basically ends with it's a world history, but it kind of begins and ends with the proposition of how the Spanish under Pizarro defeated the natives, the Inca in South America. And you could sort of expand that to colonial powers during the 1500s overpowering native societies in the Americas. And the way that this will all make sense in a minute, I promise. I'm not getting off topic. But the way that the old world was able to defeat the new world was set up millennia before it even happened. So some of the things that Diamond argues is that the Eurasian continent is long east to west. So it was easy for things like metallurgy and technology and farming to travel from east to west out of the prehistoric Near East to other societies for them to adopt. And so in this case, Spain was able to take advantage of those things like metallurgy, agriculture. There were also herd animals in the old world. So pigs, goats, sheep to begin with, and then eventually bovine and horses. And it was our exposure, or people's exposure to bovine diseases like anthrax and smallpox that inoculated populations over the years, so that immune systems in the old world were geared to that. Not completely immune, but geared towards better immunity. And so you've got things at play here that happened before, like the shape of the continents, the spread of these technologies, the epidemiological factors. The continents in America were long north to south, so it was more challenging, more difficult for technology, metallurgy, civilization to spread from north to south out of Mexico and Central America, because of all the landforms and climates that had to be overcome for that information to travel. It's not that the Spanish or the French or the English were braver than the people in the New World. It's just that there's almost no way that they could compete with gunpowder and particularly the metal implements, the swords and halberds and things like that. And the sort of unconscious biological warfare that was taking place, because smallpox was extremely virulent in the New World, and killed off millions of people. And so all of these factors were set in place millennia, thousands of years before the Spanish and the Inca even met. But the impact on those native populations was drastic and nigh irreversible, paradigm shattering. And it had to happen from an outside source with all of these distal historical advantages that existed. So how does this apply to Göbekli Tepe? Well, for all intents and purposes, before sites like Karahan Tepe, Göbekli Tepe, Tel Karamal began emerging, humans were horticulturalists and hunter-gatherers of one sort or another. Where's the source that could have impacted, if it was a human agency, where's the source on the planet that could have impacted the kind of change that happened at sites like Göbekli Tepe circa 10,500 BC? Our thinking is, again, whatever timeline you put to it, our thinking is that there's not one. And so you're only left with exploring supernatural components, extra-dimensional components even. When we talked about this on French Pop 321, our good friend, the late Dr. Mike Heiser, asked us, is this an ancient aliens interpretation? No, because we're not discounting the human agency that was at work here. We're just positing that it took an outside source, a non-human source, for these sorts of changes to begin to occur in human culture. And
Genesis 6, Enoch.
Exactly. Because when you begin to look at that and the extra biblical narrative from works like Enoch and the Genesis Apocryphon and Jubilees, then it begins to make sense. And particularly if you subscribe to a biblical worldview, it begins to make sense.
Are you a hunter or hiker or prepper, or just someone who enjoys the great outdoors? Whichever case that may be, Squatch Survival Gear has you covered. Not only is this a veteran-owned company, all of the products are 100% made in America, baby. All the way down to the fabric and every stitch. So whether it's a day hike, a weekend getaway, or the ultimate bug-out bag, head on over to squatchsurvivalgear.com and use the code PLP10 for 10% off store-wide.
Hey, I'm Karen Wilkinson. Do you have an all-access pass for Prometheus Lens Podcast? If you don't, you should. It is 100% worth it. Highly recommend it. Have a blessed day.
Does this guy know how to party or what?
Tailing off, Dr. Judd, do you have anything to add into that puzzle there?
Well, this is the whole reason why we're looking at Göbekli Tepe in a different perspective. To my knowledge, Judd and I is really the first ones to look at Göbekli Tepe with a biblical context, because we don't want to take the human factor out of it. We understand that, and we do appreciate the archaeological work that's been done there. There's no question that we wouldn't even know about it if that work hadn't been done. What Judd and I are looking at is a different framework using the Bible as a historical record, because we do know that there was a supernatural occurrence that has happened, and that's recorded in history. Dr. Heiser called it the unseen realm. And this is where Judd and I is kind of exploring a little bit into this, the unseen realm of Göbekli Tepe, because there are influences in this that have affected man. And there's plenty of evidence for this going back, even in the archaeological record. We see in Jeremiah where it talks about, you say to a piece of wood, you're my father, or to a stone, you gave birth to me. I'm paraphrasing it, but it's the verse in Jeremiah that's talking about these inanimate objects that people used to worship. This is very true with the people of the Neolithic. In the time of the Neolithic, and we talked about Jericho, the people that lived at Jericho worshipped the moon god. The people in the ancient land of Haran, this is where Abraham grew up. His father Terah lived there. They all worshipped probably many gods, but one of the primary gods that they worshipped was the moon god. It's very interesting because we see Venus being worshipped as well. Later on, we see her name appear in the archaeological record as Ishtar or Ashtar or Ashtaroth. Her name changes, but it's the same deity. And it's very interesting that at the very beginning of civilization, at the very beginning, the people of the Neolithic were doing something in these enclosures. They were not only at Göbekli Tepe, but at Jericho, at Keren Tepe, Tel Carmel, Navali Chori, Chattahoochee,
Rephaim,
a number of other places. But they have something in common. It's a common denominator. And we touched on it earlier. And Judd said it. It's the religious ideology that has brought people together under a central organization. There's a common purpose, and that purpose was religious ideology. It was not because of food, and then people came together, and then they built a city up, and then they put walls up, and then defensive fortifications, and then after all that, and they're flourishing, someone goes, "Hey, we need to build a temple and do this." Now, this is what the textbooks would tell you, but in reality, in the archaeological record, such as Göbekli Tepe, is the exact opposite. Religious ideology has come first, then everything else along after that. So this is exactly why Judd and I are looking at the religious connotations of Göbekli Tepe in a religious light, because there's something happening in this unseen realm that is influencing the people of that time. And so our job is to take a different look at the evidence and see if there is another story that is emerging out of these stones that is telling a different story, because it's about perspective. And while we do respect the archaeologist and the work that's been done, I think there's more to that story. And so what we want to do is we want to take a look at this in this, framework and see if it applies, and see if this theory bears out. Because if it does, it changes what we know about the very beginnings of mankind. And the idea that this lines up with what the biblical record has said all the way back to the book of Genesis is very intriguing, because that means that the archaeological evidence is lining up with what the scriptures have already written a long time ago, that there was an unseen realm and that there was an influence by these watchers that is described very, vividly in the book of Enoch and in other places in the scripture that's been canonized. It's very interesting that when you take a look at this, then what I like to call a 35,000-foot view, once you kind of look at this as an overarching view, then it starts to make sense. And then you can start putting some of these other pieces of the puzzle into place. Then all of a sudden you have something that you can work with. That's what Dr. Burton and I have been doing.
Well, I want to ask you guys, and you can break this up ever how you want, but is this site a pre-flood site that during the Great Deluge, and that's how it got buried? Because obviously this site was intentionally, it appears that it was intentionally buried or buried in some kind of cataclysm. So is this a pre-flood site, or is this something that maybe Ham and his genealogy, because it's right there close to the base of Mount Ararat, where everything landed, and went out and built this thing? Or is this what, like the Book of Jubilees talks about, that they found this ancient knowledge written on stone? That's one thing that stood out in my mind reading that. And basically, in your opinion, was this like similar to Babel? Was this like a gate of the gods, some way to commune and gain access to this unseen realm?
Well, I think that it's a Babel style pre-flood, sort of, as Sharon Gilbert would say, theopolitical operation. I'm of the mind that the Watchers thought that they could weaponize Eden somehow, either that they could overthrow the angel that was guarding the gate, or they could convince him to join the coup, as it were, because Eden was this place where heaven and earth touched. I mean, Adam and Eve talked to God. They communed with God in a very close manner in Eden, and so it was this very strange part of the unseen realm. So I suspect that's part of it. It's interesting that you mention the communication aspect here, because even the late Klaus Schmidt, who did the lion's share of the work on Göbekli Tepe, said that the evidence pointed to the belief that the occupants believed that this was a portal to the netherworld. And at related sites, of course, we have all of this evidence for the cult of the dead. So clearly, it did function as a means of communication with the unseen realm by the occupants there. And of course, our suspicion is that the Watchers and their Nephilim progeny, basically established these kinds of practices at sites like Göbekli Tepe. As to the coverage, the actual filling over of the site of Göbekli Tepe, that's the evidence suggests that the occupants did that, and we could certainly talk about reasons why they did it. My scholarly gut tells me that they did it because it was sort of like a buyer's regret. They realized too little too late the bill of goods that the Watchers had sold them. But I'd also like to comment, Justin, on you mentioned the story about the discovery of Watcher writings on rocks that Jubilees talks about. That, I believe, is a passage that talks about Arphaxad's line and Canaan finding the Watcher writings. That, to me, that seems to be post-flood. That element of the story seems to be post-flood, and that's part of the equation, I think, of how, whatever we want to call it, Watcher tech, Watcher religion. That's how it sort of gets the post-flood reboot.
Yeah, that's what I was saying.
So,
if it was post-flood or pre-flood, and which one? Yeah.
But Aaron can certainly comment on this as well. I don't want to take up the podium, as it were.
Well, I agree with Judd. I think the answer is that there's an influence in both. There's a pre-flood context to this, and there's a post-flood context to it as well. So the answer is both. Why? Because there's that unseen realm influence that goes all the way back to the Garden of Eden, and this is before the time of Göbekli Tepe. So we see that there is this, this influence that has come into the garden. Mike Kaiser did some terrific work in this area about who that was that came into the garden. We have all been taught the story of the serpent beguiling Eve, but if you read Evgeny Heiser's work, you understand that that's not a serpent, and so we have this kind of a childish idea, if you will, about Noah's Ark and the animals, and the serpent in the Garden of Eden. But Mike really did some brilliant work in this area, going back to the Hebrew, and that thing was not just a serpent. It wasn't a serpent like a snake, like you and I would think about. That was called the Nakash, and the Nakash was, in Hebrew, means the shining one. The shining one. It was an entity that appeared to Eve, And that's why she was able to converse with it. And it basically questioned God's authority. Did God say that you're not going to die? I mean, he's going to know once you take this thing, it's going to open your eyes and you'll know both good and evil, and you'll be like gods. But he did something interesting. He was able to converse with her, and I don't think it didn't frighten her, because he appeared as an image of light. And two, he simply asked a question: did God say? So he questioned God's authority right off the bat. But there's an influence that's happening here. And then we see later on in the Book of Enoch and other apocryphal books, but these Watcher class angels that fell, there's something happening here, because they are interfering with the affairs of mankind. And there was a boundary that was set that they were not supposed to cross. And in the, I think it's in the book of Jude, it talks about when those angels left their first estate, which was their heavenly abode, once they entered into that physicality, it was a permanent move. They could not go back to their first estate. They had to live out a physicality, which means that they lived out a physical life and then they died physically. So, and then once they died physically, they became disembodied spirits. And so Mike has done a lot of good work in this area. If you know that, if you don't, I would highly encourage you to read Michael Heiser's work on any of this. But this is where Judd and I are really picking this up with Göbekli Tepe and the unseen realm, the influences that affected the people who lived during this time at Göbekli Tepe. So the answer is both. There was a pre-flood influence with the Watchers. There's a post-flood influence, because we see that they're continuing, in the same fashion. There's more influence happening, and now they're setting up things. And look, what they're doing in these enclosures will blow your mind. It'll blow your mind, because it's not just a simple thing that they're doing here. It is a complex system that they have set up and established. It's not easy to take, multi-ton stones from a quarter of a mile away, monolithic teak, column stones, limestone, and move them up a hill and quarry them into place and set these 18.5-foot tall stones up with images on them. This thing that Judd and I are working on, it's going to really blow your mind, because once you see it, then I think the answer becomes very clear. What they're doing in those enclosures is mind-boggling. It's like, what are they doing here? And the answer is the unseen realm. There's an influence that's happening here, and Judd put it. He said it earlier. There's this gateway, if you will, to the underworld, and they all had this belief in the afterlife. This was not anything strange to the Neolithic mind. They believed in the afterlife. They believed in the cosmos. They knew about it. And what happened was, after the Garden of Eden, they lost their connection with God. It was cut off. So, so man is physically dying. You're having to work. There's this curse pronounced on creation and man and woman. And now everything has changed. Everything has changed. So I think a lot of it is this: they're trying to reestablish this lost connection with their creator. But they've been so duped by the deceiver in this, that what they think they are doing the right thing and trying to access that, they're completely worshiping that fallen angel. And I'm not just talking about a fallen angel. I'm talking about the deceiver, who has orchestrated this whole thing to get worship for himself. And I think it's very clear that this all goes back to the unseen realm, because it's about usurping God's throne. And he has got mankind to partner with him in this plan of evil. It's a policy of evil. And so I think that's what's really influenced their thought and how they practiced their belief systems and why they practiced it. And again, this all converges back to the very central common theme that ties this whole region, and that is belief in a religious ideology that has brought them all together for sites like this.
Yeah, and just how you had said it earlier, they think that, oh, we found a food source. Oh, there's a water source here. Oh, it's easier to survive here. Let's all gather here. And then that's where your social structures and your religion and all that stuff kind of just developed after that. But no, it's showing that it was the complete opposite. It was religion and faith that brought them all together in this civilization. But before I let you guys go, I don't want to keep you all day. I'm one of these nerds. I can keep you guys here for the next 4 or 5 hours. But I have to talk about some of the astrological type stuff with Göbekli, because that stuff's always just fascinated me. And there is what some people believe to be astrological type imagery on these pillars and in these T pillars. And I read in your book before you came on that these people have been shown to carve and paint facial features, but for some reason on these T pillars they didn't. It's like it's a faceless entity or an ancestor spirit or something like that. But could you guys touch on that if there is any kind of astrological type imagery and connections with this site, or is that just coincidence?
Judd, you want to?
Yeah. Well, no, I don't think it's coincidental, and we're just now starting to understand the archaeoastronomical, implements of design that were sort of built into Göbekli Tepe. I suspect that work will be as extensive as the actual excavation, if that, again, if much of it continues. There have been some theories put forward about probably one of the more famous aspects of what's known about the Göbekli Tepe complex, the vulture stela. There have been a number of conjectures as to its archaeoastronomical significance. I want to say that one of the ideas is that the vulture stela is a depiction of Scorpio. I may be wrong about that. But they simply chose to use a vulture with spread wings rather than it's either Scorpio or Sagittarius, because anyway, I'm drawing a blank on it. But what's clear is that there's certainly precedent in the ancient and even the prehistoric world for ancient star watching, and I suspect that's what's at play. What we have yet to discover at Göbekli Tepe is that we are going to find these alignments and astrological significances. They have to be, because there's a process at work here that I still don't think that historians and archaeologists and anthropologists have really embraced wholesale, is this idea that mythology, the mythological mind, which was how prehistoric and early antique peoples thought, that mythology was like an intellectual toolkit. It was the net that it wasn't just stories; it was of theological significance. That it contained all of the elements of intellectual inquiry that these people had. There's a really great book that I would recommend people read if they want to learn more about this. It's called Hamlet's Mill. That talks about, I know Justin's a big Hamlet's Mill fan. I think I may have recommended that book to you. But it talks about this very thing, about how when people watched the stars and began to record their movements, they began to extrapolate complex mathematics. So it wasn't just stories about, it wasn't just deifying the stars and the planets. It was the motions that they went through during the course of the year or a period of time that allowed them to extrapolate things like mathematics and calculus and engineering, and then apply it to the real world. I think the missing part of that equation that the authors of books like Hamlet's Mill don't pick up on is that it's the watchers that are doing the introduction, the teaching, as it were, the tutelage of a lot of this kind of stuff. Again, not taking out the human part of the equation here, but you also can't ignore the source of far superior knowledge that's at work here. And we're just now starting to learn some of those things about sites like Göbekli Tepe. But clearly, this process of mythology being the intellectual toolkit, not just the basis for things like religion and theology and history, even, it had an impact on the other so-called disciplines and sciences that prehistoric and ancient peoples utilize. And in my estimation, we're going to be learning more and more about that at sites like Göbekli Tepe and Karahan Tepe and the other late prehistoric sites.
What's going on, guys? This is Justin from the Prometheus Lens podcast. Have you head over to our website yet and checked out our store? If not, you need to. You're missing out. FOMO is a real thing. Fear of missing out. But if you go to the website and go to the store link, we got t-shirts, we got hoodies, we have tank tops, multiple colors. We even have a coffee mug to put your Kevlar Joe's coffee in. It's really cool. And we actually have 3 or 4 different designs and some new ones that just come out recently. Check some of these guys out. We have the classic logo tee. Got the logo on the front. Has a QR code on the back so people can see it, scan it, and go straight to the website and find us that way. But then we have this one. We have the look up for him, not for them, inspired by the Karen Wilkinson quote in an episode that I done with her. We have a nice scenic wood scene with the logo and a man standing here with a spaceship and a light beaming down at him with the phrase right in the center, look up for him, not for them. Same thing, has the QR code on the back to scan to bring people and find the content. And here's one of my personal favorites. Esau, incognito. We got the Bigfoot, the logo inside of the beard. And if you look closely here in the hat, it says, hello, my name is not Esau. Got the shades on, trying to blend in. But if you like some of those guys, head on over to the website, check out the store. All these designs, and I think we have another one too. It says welcome to the hero's journey. It has a guy with a backpack walking through the mountains. But all that stuff is available in t-shirts, it's in hoodies, tank tops, multiple things, multiple colors for you to choose from. And we even have a Esau coffee mug for the Kevlar Joes. But all that stuff helps support the show. That is a third-party vendor. I just design the shirts and they sell them and I get a small cut from it. So that helps support the show, but more than anything, it's a walking advertisement. When you see people see these shirts, they ask you, hey, what is the Prometheus Lens? And it points them right back to the show here and helps us to grow the show. Appreciate all the love, all the support, guys. Head on over to the store and check out some of the merch. You got anything to add with that, Aaron? Or
well, that's yeah. It's
and the faceless
interesting.
Pillars and
yeah, the faceless pillars. Well, we're putting out some work on that right now. That's forthcoming. I'll I'll leave it there because I think there's a reason why they're faceless. But look, there are stones that have faces on them at Göbekli Tepe. And we're not talking about the T column, 18.5 foot tall. Those are faceless pillars. But there are faces carved on the stones that have been found at Göbekli Tepe and at Karahan Tepe. They found one coming out of the wall. Kind of has this head image, but it looks kind of like a serpent coming out of the ground, out of the rock. It's pretty wild looking.
And Aaron, the Urfa man. Sorry to interrupt.
Oh yeah,
Urfa,
sure.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Urfa man. Same time period as Göbekli Tepe. It is a life-size, 6 foot tall, full image, human image. It's interesting. Arms come around to the navel. And it has kind of this V-shaped type of dress on it, but it was found I think near Urfa, hence the name Urfa Man. But yeah, so it's very interesting when you put all this together. I think there's more to the story to be told at Göbekli Tepe, including the possibility of language on those stones. That's what I'm excited about. I'm predicting possibly that the use of language is going to be found, probably copper, maybe the images of Venus worship or some kind of Mother Earth worship. We just don't know yet. But that's the questions of why, what's concerning me is why are they stopping or slowing down the excavations at Göbekli Tepe? Just recently, Judd was talking earlier, and I'm just going to look up here on my phone real quick, but there was, and I'll just read the headline, 3,000-year-old lost Anatolian language, Kalasma, I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right, has been deciphered. And it says in 2023, an excavation site at the foot of Bazıköy Haçuça in Turkey, a cuneiform tablet with a previously unknown Indo-European language was discovered. The newly discovered language, called Kalasma, belongs to an Anatolian Indo-European language family. And this was found in that region. So it's interesting because I've been theorizing that perhaps another Anatolian language called Anatolian hieroglyphs perhaps is known on those stones at Göbekli Tepe, and it's more specifically called the Luvian language. Why? Because they use logograms, and the Luvians had two languages. They had a written common language, but they had another formal language specifically that they used to write in stone. It was a monumental inscription. Why? Because you don't have a lot of room on stone to write. So when you do want to say something, you're going to use a logogram, which is one idea is basically equals a word. So you don't have to write out a full sentence or a paragraph. You use a logogram to convey your meaning or your message. So it's basically a shorthand form of writing. So the logogram represents the word. And I think perhaps that's what's happening at Göbekli Tepe. But it's interesting that they have discovered this new Anatolian language. So lots of new things are coming out. I just hope that in the future we get new information like this, because it can really change what we know about our very beginnings of civilization. And again, if the archaeological evidence is showing a different story that we've all been taught, then our theories need to change about all this. And I think that's one of the intriguing things about archaeology is let's look at the evidence and see what is showing us, and hopefully more and more will come out, not just at Göbekli Tepe, but other sites around the region.
Right. This is so exciting. I would fly out of my situation right now if I possibly could. This is the linguistic stuff alone is just so titillating. It's amazing, and Aaron is right about this stuff. In fact, Aaron was the one that brought it to my attention during the course of the research for the book that we're doing about the potential similarity between some epigraphs that have been found at Göbekli Tepe and the Luvian language. Here's some interesting stuff about Luvian. It was not the official language, but it was widely spoken throughout the Hittite Empire. For the longest time, I mean, the established convention is that Luvian is a mid to late Bronze Age language. Consequently, as a point of reference, Luvian was the language that was spoken in Ilios, in Western Turkey, Western Asia Minor. So the occupants of the city and region of Ilios spoke Luvian. So if you're a fan of the Iliad, that's who that the Achaeans were fighting, the Priam and the occupants of that part of Western Asia. That's the language that they were speaking. So it was widely spoken throughout and written throughout Anatolia. But if there's some linkage to these earlier sites, I'm sure Aaron is with me on this. You can't underscore the potential significance of this, and pay attention to Turkey. In a lot of ways, the Bible begins and ends here. With I'm speaking, figuratively here, but there's also some historical truth here because, you've got the Garden of Eden, you've got Haran that Abraham is called from, you got the Ark settling in the Ararat region in eastern Turkey, and this is the region of that borders the Trans-Caucasus, where the Proto-Indo-European language family began, basically. The early church, the Revelation, the biblical significance of Anatolia, ancient Turkey, cannot be emphasized enough, and the discoveries that are coming out of this part of the world, gird your loins, folks, because it's getting more exciting by the day.
Yeah, and a lot of that stuff is just totally out of my depth, but I'm so grateful that I have friends like you guys that can be the bridge gap and break some of that stuff down for me so that I can understand it. So, yeah, thank you guys for everything you do. Just, even just you guys sharing articles and stuff on Facebook for us to read and giving your comments on it, that goes a long way for us lay people. Well, guys, before I let you go, you want to give any kind of plugs, websites, conferences, books, anything you guys want to highlight and direct the viewers' attention to before we go?
Go ahead, Aaron. I'll follow you.
Yeah, just my website, aaronjudkins.com. You can follow everything. Everything will be there at aaronjudkins.com. Regarding our trip to Turkey next year, 2025, as soon as I get confirmation from Derek Gilbert, who is waiting to hear back from the folks there to confirm the itinerary and give the green light that the trip's still on, I'll put that up on my website. I'm sure Jared will have it available as well, but it will be open to the public. So we'll take whoever wants to come. It'll be an amazing trip in the ancient land of Turkey, which really has a lot to do with the Bible, actually. This is where the Church of Ephesus was founded. Just so many sites where Paul's journeys were. Over here, we're going to, of course, say Göbekli Tepe and Karahan Tepe, I think, is going to be on the list. It's just going to be an amazing time. We're going to spend some really quality, fantastic time exploring these sites. We'll go over to Ankara, which is the capital, and explore a wonderful museum that's full of archaeological evidence of the Hittites, the biblical Hittites. So it's going to be really an amazing time. And the new book, be looking for the new book that Dr. Burton and I are working on. Hopefully it'll be out by the end of the year. But it'll be all the newest and latest research on all this stuff that we can't really get into here, but I think it's going to be really intriguing for your readers to grab a copy, and just to learn about what the implications are. What's the significance? What does it mean to us today? There's a lot there that I think is related to the Bible in that unseen realm we had talked about. It really opened your eyes, and we're excited to share it with you when it comes out.
And I'm excited to read it because just watching Judd light up like a kid on Christmas over here, he bounced up out of his seat, boy. I'm like, whoa.
It's it is just so exciting. It is a scholar explorer's dream. If people want to follow my work, they can go to burtonbeyond.net. That's also the home of the Institute of Biblical Anthropology, of which my colleague here is a fellow, and I teach classes through that. People can check that out and sign up for those if they want to. Right now, again, Aaron and I are working on this book. I've got another project that I'm also working with right now with Doug Van Dorn. I'll be presenting my presentation via video at the Go Therefore conference on Peneus and Sacred Times. So if people are going to be attending that, they'll be able to view that. I have plans to be at BlurryCon 2 this fall as well. So lots happening, and of course hopefully we're looking forward to this tour of Turkey that we'll be getting to do in spring of 2025, and we'll let you guys know more details about that as we get them.
And awesome. Don't forget, we've relaunched Fringe Pop 321, which was Dr. Michael Heiser's show. And as soon as Judd can join us on set, hopefully we'll get the show back up and going. We've got several episodes that we've done already. If you just go to YouTube and type in Fringe Pop 321, you'll see some of the latest episodes there. And hopefully we can continue that show with Judd and get some great content out, and just get the information out. Dr. Heiser had, Judd, can you just take a minute and share just a couple of minutes about that?
Yeah, well, Dr. Heiser, he and I got to be pretty good friends, and of course we worked together on a number of projects over the years. But shortly before he went home to be with the Lord, he had expressed that he wanted, after the series of interviews that we did with Mike on Göbekli Tepe, he had expressed to me that he wanted Aaron and I to take over basically the reins of conducting the show, along with the producer and the backers of the show, which we gladly accepted. We wanted to continue his legacy of fully acknowledging the supernatural, but also bringing a scholarly, measured perspective on all of the high strangeness in the world, essentially. And so that's where we sit now with Fringe Pop 321. And do check out the new episodes; they're stellar, and we're looking forward to doing more of those in the future.
Yeah, we really, if you haven't been over there to the YouTube channel at Fringe Pop 321, you should go and look at some of the latest episodes, but subscribe to it, support the channel. I know that would really mean a lot to Brian, the producer of the show, and to Judd and me as well. We've hit some, just like with anything, unfortunately, we've lost Mike Heiser, and he's no longer with us, and to carry on this, a legacy in the show format of Fringe Pop 321 is difficult, to say the least. I'm not Mike Heiser, and I'm not Judd Burton, but what I can do is bring, I think, topics and things that between Dr. Burton and I and our guest that would still be Fringe Pop topic, and that would be interesting to people. And that's why Mike had asked Judd and I to continue this on. And believe me, my first answer wasn't yes. It was, I was taken back a little bit because, it's a big ask. And so we want to be able to do that in the right way. And we just need, we need support on that channel. We need really people to go and take a look at it. And if you love that and you want to see it continue, really just go by there and take a look at it and hit that subscribe button, but comment on it. We really need your feedback on it. We appreciate your feedback on it as well. So thank you for doing that.
Yeah, guys, be sure and check out all their individual work and head on over to the Fringe Pop channel and the like button, the subscribe button, and the comments. That helps the algorithm. That's why I always tell you guys, every show, drop a comment and let me know where you're from. That helps the algorithm push you up to the front and get more eyes on you. And that share button too. When you get to look at those analytics, you clicking that share button, it tracks all that. So when you're sending in text messages and sharing on social media, that gets the algorithm moving, saying, hey, people like this, they want to share it. So do everything you can to support this work. It's a good work, and help keep Mike's legacy alive, and support these gentlemen because they are carrying a very heavy load on their shoulder, and support them any way that you can. Well, guys, hope you enjoyed the episode, and until next time, torches high, guys.